As always, timestamps have been provided, and be sure to check out my new React channel down below where we cover more videos like this. Enjoy the video.
Branching pasts refers to a theoretical framework that combines inverse causality with solipsism to suggest our collective consciousness shapes not just future events, but past ones as well. The theory proposes that reality exists primarily in the present moment, with both past and future timelines remaining fluid until solidified by present perception. According to adherents, historical events with limited documentation or witnesses exist in a quantum-like state of possibility until observed and believed by enough people in the present. This creates blind spots in our shared reality, where the past can literally change to match current collective belief systems. Proponents point to the Mandela effect, widespread false memories of past events, as evidence of this phenomenon in action. When large groups misremember the same detail, they might actually be witnessing the past conforming to present perception rather than experiencing a simple memory error. The theory takes a darker turn when applied to power structures. Some theorists suggest that controlling media and information allows elites to manipulate not just our understanding of historical events, but to literally alter those events by changing public perception. By controlling what people believe happened, they control what actually happened. Supporters note the striking similarities between ancient historical rewrites, like Egyptian pharaohs erasing predecessors from monuments, and modern information control tactics. The difference is that in this framework, the erasure isn't just propaganda, but reality revision. Some researchers have documented cases where historical documentation appears to have physically changed, with original sources inexplicably matching the new narrative despite no evidence of tampering. These instances are rare, but deeply troubling to conventional historians. The concept extends beyond human perception into quantum physics, with some pointing to the delayed choice quantum eraser experiment as scientific evidence that observation in the present can indeed affect events in the past. Critics dismiss branching pasts as pseudoscience, noting it's essentially unfalsifiable. After all, if the past changes to match our beliefs about it, how would we ever know the difference? Believers counter that this unfalsifiability is precisely what makes the theory so unsettling. The final soul partition posits that human souls contain both pure essence and inherent sin that cannot exist in God's presence. Drawing from gap creationism and cyclical timeline theories, proponents believe that at the end of each human cycle, a cosmic cleansing occurs where all imperfections within souls are permanently destroyed. This process leaves souls fundamentally diminished, yet purified, like a hard drive being partitioned with less usable space after each reformat. Advocates point to declining spiritual vitality across generations as evidence of this cosmic diminishment. They suggest each cycle of humanity possesses less collective soul power than the previous one, with each purification ritual removing larger portions of increasingly corrupted souls. The theory proposes that once humanity's collective soul energy falls below a critical threshold, a final reset will trigger. More concerning are the theory's darker implications. Some interpreters suggest various historical atrocities and mass death events were actually deliberate attempts to accelerate soul weakening across the population. These acts supposedly serve to hasten the final reset by reducing humanity's collective spiritual strength below sustainable levels. Medieval religious texts containing unusual annotations about the final partitioning have been cited as historical precedent. Several obscure religious orders apparently measured declining prayer efficacy over centuries, documenting what they believed was quantifiable evidence of generational soul degradation. The theory has gained traction among certain apocalyptic communities who believe humanity is merely one reboot away from its final iteration. Quantum Grand Conspiracy refers to an elaborate theory expanding on the quantum Illuminati concept, where a powerful elite group manipulates reality across parallel universes. This shadowy cabal allegedly possesses the technology or ability to move significant individuals, referred to as Penergic people, between different universes, effectively orchestrating grand-scale control over multiple realities simultaneously. According to believers, the Quantum Illuminati uses non-player characters or NPCs, essentially soulless humans they control, as test subjects to evaluate the capabilities and responses of Penergic individuals. These tests serve as recruitment trials, identifying those worthy of joining their interdimensional secret society while keeping the majority of humanity unaware of their machinations. The theory proposes that phenomena like the Mandela effect are actually side effects of this quantum manipulation. These reality discrepancies occur when the elite shift important individuals between parallel universes, causing ripple effects in collective memory and historical records. Perhaps most disturbing is the theory's endgame scenario. The Quantum Illuminati is working to consolidate all Penergic people into a single locus universe. This consolidation would prevent quantum jumping, the supposed ability of consciousness to shift between realities during near-death experiences, and allow for the complete annihilation of all Penergic people, leaving only the elite with absolute power. Proponents link this to the energy coagulation theory, suggesting the unusual population explosion over the past century represents souls being gathered from multiple realities into our timeline. Once this consolidation is complete, the theory claims the elite will execute their final plan, eliminating everyone except themselves to attain unprecedented power concentration. The ultimate goal allegedly connects to the Babel true meaning theory, that the biblical Tower of Babel wasn't merely about language, but about reaching higher dimensions. With the energy harvested from consolidated realities, the Quantum Illuminati supposedly aims to recreate this tower, accessing divine realms and potentially challenging or overthrowing God himself. Like many grand unified conspiracy theories, this one conveniently stitches together numerous fringe concepts from quantum mysticism, biblical reinterpretation, and modern digital age anxieties about simulated realities, creating an all-encompassing narrative where nothing happens by chance and everything serves the hidden master's plan. True mortal ascension refers to the concept that humans can achieve godhood through mass worship and adulation. This theory expands on mundane reincarnation by suggesting that when enough people direct their attention and reverence toward a single individual, that person can harvest this collective spiritual energy, strengthening their soul beyond normal human capacity. According to believers, this soul enhancement allows these individuals to transcend human limitations after death, ascending to a higher plane of existence rather than following the normal cycle of reincarnation. This supposedly explains why celebrities, politicians, and other public figures seem obsessively focused on maintaining their fame and public image. They're literally collecting soul energy for their eventual ascension. The concept further suggests that many historical deities were simply charismatic or powerful humans who successfully completed this ascension process. After death, these former humans allegedly gained the ability to influence worldly affairs from their elevated spiritual position, essentially becoming the gods of various pantheons throughout history. This theory puts an interesting spin on modern celebrity worship. Those 15 minutes of fame might be more consequential than we realize. Every social media follow, every poster on a teenager's wall, every fan club membership potentially contributes to someone's eventual godhood. That influencer asking you to like and subscribe might be planning for something far beyond monetization. Proponents point to the similarities between ancient god kings of Mesopotamia and Egypt and today's mega-celebrities, both commanding massive attention, devotion, and resources from their followers. Some theorists suggest we can identify potential ascension candidates by tracking individuals who maintain inexplicable levels of fame despite limited talent or contribution to society. The implications become particularly troubling when considering which modern figures might be accumulating the most worship energy. Political leaders with cult-like followings, religious figures with devoted congregations, and entertainment icons with millions of adoring fans could all be positioning themselves for post-mortal godhood, their human personas merely vessels collecting power for their ultimate transformation. The Dreaming God describes a theory merging lucid dreaming concepts with simulation and divine consciousness. According to this idea, our entire reality exists within the dream of a sleeping deity. Just as humans can control their lucid dreams upon realizing they're dreaming, this theory suggests we inhabit a vast cosmic dream where each person possesses a fragment of the dreamer's divine power. Proponents point to the widespread phenomenon of lucid dreaming as a miniature version of our larger cosmic situation. They suggest that certain mystical traditions throughout history have unknowingly been attempting to access this dream control power through meditation, psychedelics, or ritual practices that alter consciousness. The concept of reality hypersigils emerges from this framework, proposing that by understanding the dreamlike nature of our existence, individuals might manipulate reality using the same mechanisms that allow dream control. Some adherents claim to have achieved minor reality alterations through focused intention and belief, essentially hacking the dream reality code. More extreme versions of the theory suggest that full enlightenment means recognizing our status as dream fragments and potentially waking up from the simulation entirely. This awakening is described variously as transcendence, enlightenment, or literal escape from our level of reality into a higher plane of existence. Critics note the theory's convenient unfalsifiability and similarity to existing religious concepts of Maya, cosmic illusion, from Hindu traditions, or certain Buddhist perspectives on reality's illusory nature. Skeptics argue it merely repackages ancient mystical concepts with modern simulation theory language. Despite the criticism, the Dreaming God maintains a devoted following in certain esoteric communities who view lucid dreaming practices as spiritual training for eventually manipulating or transcending the greater cosmic dream we call reality. Job's message stems from a reinterpretation of the biblical text where a faithful man is told by God not to concern himself with understanding the workings of the world. Traditional readings view this as a lesson in humility, but conspiracy theorists suggest a deeper meaning. Perhaps God wasn't discouraging knowledge itself, but warning against presuming to comprehend everything at once. The theory proposes that humans are meant to build understanding incrementally across generations. Each era learns what it can and passes that foundation to the next. This collaborative, multi-generational approach to knowledge mirrors scientific progress rather than forbidding it. This interpretation directly challenges the God of the Gaps phenomenon, where throughout history, humans have attributed unexplained natural events to divine intervention. As science progresses, these gaps in knowledge shrink, and with them, the space where divine explanation is necessary. Ancient texts across multiple cultures show similar patterns, advice from higher beings to focus on immediate, verifiable knowledge rather than grasping at cosmic mysteries beyond current comprehension. This suggests a universal warning against premature conclusions rather than a prohibition on curiosity. Archaeological findings indicate that civilizations that embraced methodical knowledge building survived longer than those fixated on supernatural explanations. Some researchers believe this pattern represents a form of natural selection for cognitive approaches. The message appears in secular philosophical traditions as well, with ancient Greek and Chinese texts warning against the hubris of claiming to understand that which cannot yet be measured or observed. These parallel warnings suggest a cross-cultural recognition of this epistemological principle. Modern conspiracy communities point to quantum physics and consciousness studies as examples of fields where humans might be reaching beyond their current cognitive capabilities, exactly what this biblical message warns against. The truly wise approach, they argue, is patient, generation-spanning inquiry. Ironically, those who most firmly reject scientific progress in favor of supernatural explanations may be the ones truly ignoring the divine advice hidden in plain sight. One God of all humanity refers to a theological framework that reinterprets traditional religious understanding by suggesting that divinity exists within all humans, rather than solely as an external entity. This concept proposes that the fragment of God residing in each soul is what drives religious impulses across humanity, explaining why cultures worldwide develop worship practices despite geographic isolation. The theory suggests that religious texts like the Bible aren't proof of God's existence, but rather instruction manuals helping humans recognize and nurture the divine spark already present within themselves and others. Under this framework, worship transforms from an external practice of appeasing a distant deity to an internal process of amplifying the divine essence already present in the worshipper. When combined with the infinite body's one soul concept, this theory suggests each person's ultimate purpose is to refine and perfect their internal fragment of divinity before their soul ascends to an afterlife state. This would explain why some people seem more spiritually advanced than others. They've simply gone through more cycles of refinement. The theory takes an apocalyptic turn when paired with Christian reincarnation ideas, suggesting that Earth's population explosion represents a cosmic last call for souls to complete their spiritual journeys. According to this view, the unprecedented number of humans alive today offers one final opportunity for souls to achieve perfection before an imminent end of days terminates the reincarnation cycle forever. Some proponents point to biblical passages about the kingdom of God is within you as evidence for this interpretation, while skeptics note that these concepts conveniently blend Eastern reincarnation philosophy with Western monotheism, perhaps revealing more about modern syncretistic thinking than ancient truth. Memetic Horsemen describes a modern reinterpretation of the four horsemen of the apocalypse from the Book of Revelation as conceptual viruses rather than physical entities. According to this theory, the horsemen represent infectious ideas that spread rapidly through human consciousness, triggering large-scale behavioral changes without requiring physical manifestations. Traditional interpretations view the horsemen, war, famine, death, and pestilence, or conquest in some translations, as literal harbingers of the apocalypse. However, proponents of the Memetic Horseman theory suggest that biblical descriptions of their influence over humanity actually refer to their ability to infect human minds with destructive thought patterns on a global scale. The concept draws from memetics, the study of ideas that replicate and spread like viruses, suggesting that these apocalyptic forces operate primarily through collective psychology. For example, the horsemen of war wouldn't need to physically instigate conflicts, but would spread ideas of hostility, tribalism, and aggression, causing societies to turn against each other seemingly simultaneously. Supporters point to how quickly wartime propaganda can transform peaceful populations into combatants, how panic about resource scarcity creates actual shortages through hoarding, and how disease fears can paralyze entire continents. These rapid social transformations, they argue, align perfectly with the horseman's biblical description of sweeping across the world with supernatural speed. Some theorists have noted that modern communication technologies create ideal conditions for these memetic entities to fulfill their apocalyptic purpose. Social media, global news, and instantaneous communication allow destructive ideas to reach billions in hours, making our hyper-connected world the perfect breeding ground for apocalyptic thought contagions. Religious scholars opposed to this interpretation counter that it diminishes the literal truth of Scripture, while others find it a compelling bridge between ancient texts and modern understanding of how information shapes human behavior. Babylon's aura suggests that ancient prophecies about Babylon in the Book of Revelation refer to an energetic imprint rather than a physical city or empire. This theory extends the concept that non-living entities maintain auras, invisible energy fields containing the essence and influence of their creators. According to proponents, the ancient empire of Babylon generated a powerful collective aura during its existence. This energetic signature contained the empire's cultural values, spiritual practices, and imperial ambitions. When the physical empire fell, its aura remained, drifting through history and influencing various civilizations. Biblical prophecies speaking of Babylon rising again in the end times aren't referring to the literal rebuilding of ancient ruins in Iraq. Instead, believers claim this powerful aura will eventually attach itself to and influence a modern nation. This nation would then manifest Babylonian attributes without any obvious historical connection. Theorists point to certain nations today exhibiting Babylonian characteristics: materialism, religious mixing, technological pride, and imperial expansion. These parallels aren't coincidental, but evidence of the ancient aura gradually taking hold of national consciousness. The theory explains why identifying the Babylon mentioned in Revelation has confounded scholars for centuries. They've been searching for physical connections instead of energetic ones. This interpretation conveniently allows the prophecy to be applied to whichever nation seems most Babylonian at any given historical moment. Some versions suggest secret societies and occult groups actively work to channel Babylon's aura to specific nations through monuments, architectural designs, and rituals that attract and anchor this ancient energy pattern. Perhaps most troubling for believers is how this transference happens invisibly, with citizens unaware their nation is being transformed from within by an ancient imperial force. Apparently, the Tower of Babel wasn't just an architectural failure. It was Babylon's first attempt at creating a spiritual Wi-Fi network that's still trying to connect. Revelations 6:15. Hollow Earth theory connects biblical prophecy with the concept of a hollow earth inhabited by former cycles of humanity. The verse describes people hiding in the caverns and among the rocks of mountains during apocalyptic events, which some interpret as evidence of habitable realms beneath our feet, rather than mere hiding places. This theory proposes that hell isn't merely a spiritual concept, but a physical location inside Earth, where previous iterations of sinful humanity were banished. According to this view, the Great Flood wasn't sent to destroy sinners, but to force them underground, effectively creating the first population of what we now call demons, essentially humans who became wholly corrupted. Gap creationism enters this framework by suggesting multiple creation cycles occurred before our current world. Each cycle allegedly ended when humanity became irredeemably sinful, with God banishing these fallen humans to inner Earth rather than destroying them completely. The biblical promise that humanity would never again be destroyed by flood takes on new meaning here, not as divine mercy, but because hell has reached maximum capacity. Proponents point to the Nephilim Earth concept, suggesting Eden itself was originally located inside Earth, and humans were later relocated to the surface. The deluge refugees aspect theorizes that some flood survivors weren't saved by Noah's Ark, but instead fled deeper into Earth's hollow spaces. This theory also attempts to explain why powerful elites might have access to seemingly impossible technologies. The patents held by demons idea suggests that inner Earth inhabitants, former humans with thousands of years of accumulated knowledge, trade their advanced inventions with surface elites in exchange for various favors. The Hell excavation conspiracy takes this further, suggesting that mining operations and deep underground military bases aren't just for resources or security, but desperate attempts by elites to expand Hell's capacity. They're supposedly trying to delay Judgment Day by creating more space for condemned souls, while simultaneously preparing their own underground refugees for the coming apocalypse. Believers in this theory see modern tunneling projects and deep underground facilities as evidence of ongoing communication between surface elites and these inner Earth entities, or as some would call them, the original fallen humans who became the demons of our nightmares. Mosaic Law Validation refers to the theory that ancient biblical laws found in the Pentateuch, seemingly arbitrary at first glance, are gradually being validated by modern scientific discoveries. Many hygiene and dietary restrictions once dismissed as primitive superstitions have found surprising support in contemporary medicine and public health sciences. The prohibition against eating pork prevented trichinosis in an era without refrigeration. Commands to wash hands and quarantine the sick likely saved countless lives during outbreaks. Rules about human waste disposal essentially created early sanitation systems thousands of years before germ theory. The ancient Israelites practiced these rituals on faith, not fully understanding their protective benefits. Proponents of this theory suggest we're witnessing only the beginning of scientific validation for biblical wisdom. If seemingly random health codes have been proven sensible, perhaps more spiritual practices like prayer, angelic communication, or divine experiences might eventually be explained through advanced neuroscience, quantum physics, or other fields not yet developed. This perspective reframes humanity's relationship with biblical revelation. Rather than passively awaiting prophesied events, humans actively participate in bringing about the new age through scientific discovery and understanding. The Book of Revelation becomes less a predetermined timeline and more a description of what happens when humanity finally solves these spiritual mysteries. The theory elegantly explains why Scripture claims no one can know the day or hour of end times events. If revelation depends on humanity making specific scientific breakthroughs, then indeed no one could predict exactly when these discoveries would occur. Yet once they happen, we would immediately enter that prophesied era, making prediction impossible by definition. Biblical calls to seek wisdom take on new meaning through this lens, not merely personal spiritual growth, but collective human progress toward understanding the material mechanisms behind spiritual realities. The age of faith gives way to an age of spiritual certainty through scientific validation, just as the age of law was fulfilled by Christ. Some theologians joke that perhaps God's greatest miracle was creating laws that made scientific sense thousands of years before science existed to validate them, leaving breadcrumbs for humanity to follow toward greater understanding once we developed the tools to see them. Alighieri's Insights proposes that Dante's Divine Comedy wasn't merely allegorical fiction, but contained hidden truths about demonic possession among societal elites. According to this theory, certain extreme sins can cause souls to be forcibly extracted to hell, while demons take control of the abandoned bodies. This would explain why powerful figures across different sectors seem to exhibit similar moral corruption while maintaining cohesive networks and agendas. Proponents point to passages in the Divine Comedy, where sinners are described as being pulled down to the underworld before their natural deaths. They suggest Dante was encoding actual supernatural phenomena he had witnessed or learned about through secret knowledge. The unity among corrupt elites despite apparent differences makes more sense, theorists argue, if they're actually inhabited by entities from the same demonic hierarchy. This theory intertwines with other conspiracy concepts like forced soul removal and spirit removal, suggesting there's an established metaphysical mechanism for separating consciousness from physical forms. Some connect this to the Revelations 6:15 theory, proposing that elites emerge from hollow earth entrances, use advanced technology to alter appearances, and replace problematic individuals after eliminating the originals. The systematic nature of elite corruption across centuries could indicate possession by the same ancient demons operating on extended timescales beyond human lifespans. This would create the illusion of continuous human institutions, while actually representing the sustained influence of supernatural entities manipulating world events from the shadows, literally wearing human disguises while carrying out an agenda spanning millennia. Believers suggest the peculiar uniformity of corruption among the powerful represents something beyond mere human tendencies toward greed and abuse of power. After all, Wouldn't true human diversity produce at least some consistently virtuous leaders? The absence of such figures, they argue, is evidence that something else, something literal from Dante's hellish realms, is pulling the strings. Enoch's legacy suggests an inverse relationship to Alighieri's insights, where exceptionally virtuous behavior causes souls to ascend to heaven while their physical bodies remain on earth, possessed by angels. This celestial possession represents another method of soul removal, alongside those described in the forced soul removal and spirit removal theories. The concept provides a potential explanation for the incorruptible saints phenomenon, where certain holy figures' bodies mysteriously resist natural decomposition after death. According to this theory, these preserved corpses aren't simply blessed remains, but physical vessels whose original souls departed for heaven, replaced by angelic entities that prevent decay and death while fulfilling divine missions on earth. Once an angel's earthly purpose concludes, they abandon the body, potentially leaving it vulnerable to occupation by demons or other malevolent forces. This connects to the one God of all humanity theory, suggesting that after a soul perfects itself and reunites with the divine source, an angel temporarily inhabits the vacated body for its natural lifespan. The theory takes a darker turn when explaining subsequent reincarnations, proposing that these recycled vessels become controlled by demons rather than angels, creating what observers perceive as NPCs. This would explain the apparent increase in NPC-like behavior in modern times, as more bodies cycle through this process of angelic abandonment followed by demonic occupation. Soul expungement and bodily possession refers to a terrifying extension of the demonic interrogation theory, suggesting certain substances or rituals don't just open doorways to demonic influence, but enable complete spiritual displacement. According to believers, specific psychoactive compounds or occult practices can weaken the soul's connection to the physical body enough for a malevolent entity to fully seize control. Medieval texts describe individuals who appeared physically unchanged but displayed radical personality alterations after consuming certain plant mixtures or participating in specific rituals. These accounts often mention the victim's eyes becoming hollow or vacant, despite continuing to function normally in society. Proponents point to cases where people with no prior criminal history suddenly committed atrocious acts, afterward claiming to have no memory of their actions, or insisting something else was controlling them. Some theorists believe these aren't merely psychological breaks, but evidence of complete soul expungement. The Vatican maintains classified records of exorcisms, where subjects reportedly spoke in unknown languages and demonstrated knowledge they couldn't possibly possess. In several documented cases, the possessed described their own souls as trapped observers within their bodies, conscious but powerless. Ancient shamanic traditions across multiple continents contain warnings about specific trance states that should never be entered alone, as they create empty vessels vulnerable to occupation. These traditions developed elaborate protective rituals and community safeguards to prevent such spiritual vulnerabilities. Modern proponents suggest certain synthetic drugs may have been specifically designed to facilitate this process, pointing to government mind control experiments that allegedly discovered the soul could be loosened from the body. These conspiracy theorists maintain that the most dangerous substances were never publicly acknowledged. Some occultists claim to identify possessed individuals through aura reading, describing a distinctive shadow overlay that indicates a foreign presence has taken residence in someone's body. They claim this phenomenon is becoming increasingly common in our spiritually disconnected modern world. Perhaps most disturbing is the theory that demonic entities prefer this method of incarnation over traditional possession because it's permanent rather than temporary. Once the original soul is expelled or trapped, the body becomes the demon's permanent earthly vessel, allowing it to operate undetected among humans for decades. Demons Carry Out Prophecies describes a theological paradox where demons inadvertently fulfill divine prophecies through their very attempts to corrupt humanity. Biblical prophecies like Jesus' sacrifice and the events in Revelation are presented as God's response to human sin. Yet the Bible simultaneously emphasizes free will, suggesting these prophesied events could theoretically be avoided if humanity collectively rejected sin. The theory connects to the enigmatic patriarchs of Adam concept, referring to figures in Enoch's cycle who may have transcended the need for apocalyptic judgment by resisting sin entirely. Their direct ascension to heaven without experiencing death represents an alternative path humanity could have followed. Since demonic temptation is considered the root cause of sin, and sin necessitates prophetic fulfillment, demons become unwitting instruments in God's grand design. By tempting humans to sin, demons create the very conditions requiring divine intervention, essentially forcing themselves to carry out the prophecies they oppose. This creates a fascinating theological conundrum. Demons appear to lack the same free will granted to humans, as they seem compelled to tempt humanity, despite knowing their actions ultimately serve God's purposes. Their rebellion paradoxically advances the divine plan they seek to disrupt. Some theologians have noted this resembles a cosmic chess game, where demons believe they're making strategic moves against God, unaware they're playing exactly the role assigned to them. It's like being told not to push a button, then pushing it anyway, only to discover you've activated exactly what the button maker intended all along. The theory suggests a deeper layer to spiritual warfare, where demons, despite their resistance, remain under God's sovereign control, making them unwilling participants in the very prophecies they despise. Language of God refers to a theological concept derived from the biblical creation narrative in Genesis, suggesting that God's speech directly manifested physical reality. This ancient interpretation proposes that God's voice isn't merely communicative, but fundamentally creative, words that instantly transform into matter and energy. Proponents of this theory point to Genesis 1:3, "And God said, 'Let there be light,' and there was light," as evidence that divine utterance is the raw mechanism of creation. They suggest that angels serve as intermediaries precisely because direct divine communication would be too powerful for human comprehension, potentially overriding free will through its sheer creative force. The theory connects to the Tower of Babel story, suggesting that pre-confusion humanity possessed fragments of this divine language, explaining how ancient people could attempt constructing a tower to heaven despite limited technology. Their linguistic capability, remnants of the creation language, allowed them to manipulate reality in ways modern humans cannot, despite our advanced technology and resources. Some adherents believe certain existing languages contain echoes of this primordial speech. They claim these linguistic fragments explain why particular words, chants, or prayers across various traditions seem to produce effects beyond normal communication. These are diluted remnants of creation's original language. This concept ties into theories about divine linguistic censorship, which proposes that humans were deliberately prevented from accessing the full creative power of language. The confusion at Babel wasn't just about communication barriers, but a cosmic firewall preventing humanity from wielding speech as a creative force. Interestingly, linguistic anthropologists have noted that certain ancient languages do contain unusual mathematical properties and patterns that don't appear in modern communication systems. Whether these are coincidences or linguistic fossils of something greater remains hotly debated in both theological and linguistic circles. Whisper the word light next time you're in complete darkness. You never know. You might be speaking a corrupted version of the most powerful word ever uttered. Lamech's Lamentations describes a disturbing theory connecting biblical figures to modern occult practices. According to this conspiracy, the biblical chain of murder that began with Cain killing Abel, followed by Lamech killing Cain, never actually ended. Instead, it continued through history via an unbroken chain of ritualistic murders perpetuated by elite secret societies. The theory draws from the obscure soul entrapment concept, which suggests that when someone is murdered in specific ritualistic ways, their soul becomes captive to their killer. This is then combined with the finite soul energy hypothesis, the idea that all spiritual power in existence is divided among currently living souls. If fewer souls exist, each living person holds more power. Proponents believe that through this continuous chain of ritual killings, the primordial soul of Abel, considered exceptionally pure and powerful, has remained trapped in the physical realm for thousands of years, passed from host to host through carefully orchestrated murders. By controlling Abel's captive soul, these elites supposedly gain access to supernatural abilities and influence far beyond normal human capacity. The conspiracy claims that certain bloodlines meticulously preserved this knowledge, with intricate rituals designed to transfer Abel's entrapped soul to new vessels before the previous host dies naturally, which would release Abel's soul. These elaborate ceremonies allegedly occur at astronomical alignments matching those described in fragmented pre-flood texts attributed to Lamech himself. Some versions suggest that mysterious symbols found in elite architecture actually represent Abel's captive soul or the ritual needed to maintain its imprisonment. Conspiracy theorists point to certain wealthy families who seemingly possess impossible luck or influence as potential current custodians of Abel's soul. The theory gets extra bizarre when adherents claim that certain world leaders exhibit what they call Abel's remorse, momentary expressions of profound sorrow that supposedly reveal the captive soul briefly surfacing. Divinity is a recessive trait, proposes that spiritual qualities follow genetic inheritance patterns, with divine attributes functioning like recessive genes that become increasingly rare across generations. Proponents point to ancient Hindu texts describing the Kali Yuga, our current cosmic age characterized by spiritual decline, as evidence that humanity's connection to the divine diminishes over time as sinful traits dominate our spiritual DNA. According to this theory, spiritual corruption compounds generationally, explaining accelerating moral decay in modern society. Religious texts across cultures do describe historical golden ages of heightened spiritual awareness, followed by progressive spiritual deterioration, which adherents cite as supporting evidence. The concept mirrors scientific understanding of genetic drift, where rare traits eventually disappear from populations without selective pressure maintaining them. Those who embrace this framework often highlight Jesus as the ultimate example of divine recessive traits expressing fully. They suggest his divinity emerged because both Mary's immaculate conception and God's direct paternity created the perfect spiritual genetic conditions, two carriers of pure divine traits producing offspring with fully expressed divinity, untainted by the spiritual corruption affecting ordinary humans. Some theologians have quietly explored whether saints and prophets throughout history represent partial expressions of these recessive divine traits, appearing with decreasing frequency as humanity's spiritual genome becomes increasingly dominated by sinful traits. Mystical traditions often describe spiritual practices as attempts to activate dormant divine qualities within us, essentially trying to express these recessive spiritual genes through concentrated effort. Interestingly, this theory provides a biological metaphor for theological concepts of original sin and redemption, suggesting that spiritual inheritance follows predictable patterns that could theoretically be mapped and even manipulated. Of course, unlike actual genetics, no scientist has managed to isolate the divine gene, though not for lack of trying in certain fringe research circles. The Reality Schism describes a theoretical cosmic separation between physical, mental, and spiritual dimensions that occurred in biblical times. Biblical accounts frequently mention magical practices like divination, necromancy, and spellcasting as genuine phenomena, yet these mystical elements seem notably absent from our modern world. This apparent discontinuity has led some theorists to propose a fundamental shift in reality's structure. According to proponents, this cosmic division may have manifested during Christ's ascension, the final direct intervention from God before humanity was left to navigate existence independently. The theory suggests Jesus' departure created distinct, segregated realms. Humans became confined to physical reality. God withdrew to the purely spiritual domain, and malevolent forces established dominion over the noosphere, the collective consciousness of humanity. This framework recontextualizes biblical concepts of sin and temptation as a struggle between humanity's spiritual nature and the corrupting influence of these noosphere lords who manipulate human thought patterns. The theory connects with broader conspiracy narratives about alchemical suppression, proposing that genuine supernatural abilities didn't simply disappear, but were systematically partitioned away from human access. Some adherents point to biblical passages describing the veil of the temple being torn at Jesus' crucifixion as symbolic representation of this reality shift. They suggest ancient magical practices actually worked because the boundaries between realms were once more permeable, allowing spiritual energies to manifest physically. Proponents find support in early Christian writings that emphasize humanity's tripartite nature: body, mind, and spirit, arguing this reflects the three divided realms. The theory paints modern existence as a deliberate test where humans must resist mental corruption while lacking direct access to spiritual reinforcement, essentially playing a cosmic game on hard mode. Curiously, modern reports of paranormal phenomena are interpreted as leaks between these separated realms, brief instances where the schism temporarily weakens. In this view, spiritual practices like prayer and meditation represent attempts to breach the division and reconnect with the spiritual realm that was once naturally accessible to all. Prophecy Mediums describes a theological theory about how divine prophecies manifest differently in biblical eras versus modern times. Ancient prophecies in the Old Testament flowed through bloodlines of faithful believers, with God directly intervening through chosen vessels like Abraham, Moses, and the prophets. These individuals served as direct conduits for divine messages, receiving visions, dreams, and direct communication from God. The theory suggests a fundamental shift occurred between the Old and New Testament periods, changing how prophecies unfold in our world. While God once worked primarily through devoted human mediums, modern prophecies now operate through more complex and obscured channels. Even more intriguing is the proposal that demonic forces, still ultimately subject to God's sovereign will, have become the primary instruments fulfilling divine prophecies today. This perspective aligns with biblical passages suggesting Satan was given temporary dominion over earth. According to this theory, demons serve as reluctant agents carrying out predetermined events, creating a strange cosmic dynamic where evil entities paradoxically advance God's ultimate plan. The demons operate with limited free will, unable to deviate from the divine blueprint despite their malevolent nature. Proponents point to specific biblical passages describing Satan as the prince of this world and the god of this age to support their view. They argue this explains why modern prophecy fulfillment often appears chaotic, violent, or morally ambiguous. The means have changed even if the divine ends remain consistent. Some adherents of this theory detect a pattern of demonic signatures in world events that seem to fulfill biblical prophecies about the end times. This creates a theological framework where everything from technological developments to geopolitical conflicts can be interpreted as reluctant demonic fulfillment of divine plans. Critics note this perspective potentially absolves humans of moral responsibility by attributing events to supernatural agents rather than human choices. Others worry it creates a fatalistic worldview where believers passively observe rather than actively opposing evil. As one theologian quipped, If demons are doing God's work anyway, why bother getting your hands dirty? True free will explores the complex theological relationship between sin, demonic influence, and human agency in biblical prophecy. The theory suggests that when humans submit to sin, they become unwitting pawns of demonic forces, effectively surrendering their free will to become instruments of prophetic fulfillment. Biblical examples support this concept, such as Pharaoh in Exodus, whose heart was hardened by God, causing him to repeatedly refuse Moses' requests despite mounting plagues. Similarly, Judas Iscariot's betrayal of Jesus was prophesied, yet he seemingly acted of his own accord, suggesting a deeper spiritual mechanism at work. Proponents point to numerous scripture passages hinting that humans exist in one of two spiritual states, either aligned with God's will or subjected to demonic influence. This binary perspective challenges conventional understandings of free choice, suggesting that actions performed under the influence of sin aren't truly free, but rather manipulated by dark forces. The theory proposes that genuine freedom exists only in alignment with God's divine purpose. What humans perceive as freedom in sinful choices is actually a deceptive form of spiritual bondage. Those who reject divine guidance unwittingly become tools for fulfilling prophecies while believing they act independently. This interpretation offers a fresh perspective on the biblical statement that humans are created in God's image. Rather than referring merely to physical or intellectual similarities, it suggests that humans uniquely share God's capacity for true free will, a will that can only be fully expressed when aligned with divine purpose. Scholars supportive of this theory note that it elegantly resolves the apparent theological contradiction between divine foreknowledge and human choice. It suggests that while God respects human agency, those who choose sin effectively forfeit their freedom to supernatural forces that ultimately serve God's prophetic timeline. Critics argue that this perspective diminishes human moral responsibility by attributing sinful actions to external forces. However, advocates counter that the initial choice to sin remains entirely human. It's only the subsequent actions that become supernaturally directed. Perhaps the most unsettling implication is that millions unknowingly serve as prophetic instruments, believing themselves free while actually being directed by forces beyond their comprehension or control. Divine resets refers to the theory that catastrophic events throughout human history are not random disasters or results of human action, but deliberate interventions by higher powers, specifically God, to prevent humanity from developing in undesirable directions. These divine interventions supposedly function as cosmic course corrections when human civilization veers too far from a divinely ordained path. The concept draws heavily from religious texts, particularly the biblical flood narrative where God purged the world of wickedness, sparing only Noah and his family. Proponents point to God's promise after the flood to never again destroy humanity in such a manner not as mercy, but as an ominous sign that our current civilization represents humanity's final opportunity for redemption. This theory extends the framework of gap creationism, which attempts to reconcile scientific evidence of Earth's ancient age with biblical creation accounts by suggesting long-time gaps between creation events. Divine reset theorists take this further, proposing that previous human civilizations may have existed and been wiped away, leaving minimal archaeological evidence of their existence. Adherents cite various ancient flood myths across different cultures as evidence that previous resets have occurred. They also point to mysterious archaeological anomalies and seemingly advanced ancient knowledge as potential remnants from previous cycles of human civilization that were divinely terminated. Some versions of the theory suggest that humanity is approaching another threshold that might trigger divine intervention. These theorists interpret modern moral debates, technological advancement, and environmental crises as signs that we are testing the boundaries of divine patience once again. Interestingly, the theory occasionally attracts both religious fundamentalists and secular conspiracy theorists. The former see it as validation of divine judgment, while the latter reframe the divine element as actions by advanced ancient beings or extraterrestrials managing human development through controlled catastrophes. Modern proponents sometimes combine this theory with concerns about artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, or quantum physics experiments, suggesting that these developments might cross boundaries that would trigger another reset. The warning signs, they claim, are all around us. We're just not paying attention to the cosmic alarm bells. Soytan's Soyciety theorizes that a demonic conspiracy uses soy products to weaken humanity's spiritual defenses. According to believers, soy consumption doesn't just alter hormone levels as mainstream soy boy theories suggest, but actually thins the barrier between our world and demonic realms. Proponents point to the dramatic increase in soy consumption coinciding with what they see as society's moral decline. They claim ancient texts warned against consuming certain soul-weakening plants that match soy's description. These texts supposedly describe how demons require an open doorway to influence human affairs. The theory incorporates elements from fluoride conspiracy theories, suggesting that the combination of fluoridated water and soy creates a powerful 1-2 punch against spiritual immunity. Believers claim this explains why both became widespread in Western diets during similar timeframes. Some adherents have compiled evidence showing statistical correlations between regions with high soy consumption and increased reports of paranormal activity. They also point to certain corporate logos in the food industry that allegedly contain hidden occult symbolism related to demonic pacts. The more extreme versions of this theory tie into apocalyptic predictions, claiming that demons are gradually increasing soy prevalence to reach a tipping point where humanity's collective spiritual immunity collapses. This supposedly fulfills certain interpretations of biblical end times prophecies about masses falling under dark influence. Curiously, proponents often exempt fermented soy products like traditional Asian dishes from their warnings, claiming the fermentation process actually purifies soy of its demonic receptivity, a convenient loophole that attempts to explain why Asian populations haven't succumbed to mass possession despite centuries of soy consumption. Inevitable Prophecies refers to the complex interplay between free will, divine predetermination, and prophetic fulfillment across human history. This theory suggests that both divine followers and demonic servants ultimately serve the same cosmic purpose, the manifestation of prophesied events that were written into existence by ancient societies. The concept builds upon two established theories: true free will, which proposes that humans can surrender their agency to demonic entities, and divine heritage, which suggests ancient civilizations encoded their desired futures into religious texts to ensure their manifestation through collective consciousness. Proponents point to biblical prophecies as evidence of this mechanism at work. When early religious communities documented their prophecies, they weren't merely predicting the future, but actively influencing it by embedding these ideas into human consciousness. The prophecies themselves became inevitable once recorded and disseminated. What makes this theory particularly unsettling is its suggestion that demons lack free will entirely, functioning as cosmic automatons carrying out predetermined roles. Humans who align with these entities unknowingly surrender their own agency, becoming unwitting instruments in fulfilling prophecies they may actively oppose. Meanwhile, those who follow divine guidance believe they're exercising free will while actually participating in the same grand design. The theory proposes that religious texts aren't just predictions, but cosmic programming, with both the faithful and the fallen serving as complementary execution mechanisms. Historical evidence cited includes apparent patterns in how prophesied events unfold, often through the actions of individuals who believe they're acting independently. Scholars note that many fulfilled prophecies occur through seemingly unrelated chains of human decisions that nonetheless converge toward the predicted outcome. The most profound implication is that cosmic destiny operates regardless of individual belief systems. Those serving demonic forces motivate the conditions for prophecies, while the faithful execute them, creating a perfect balance that ensures prophetic fulfillment despite appearing to be opposing forces. This theory resolves the ancient theological paradox of divine omniscience versus human free will by suggesting a middle path. Choices remain free while simultaneously serving a grand design so intricate that no single participant can comprehend their role within it. Humanity is a God proposes that our species collectively forms a divine entity ruling the physical realm. This cosmology stems from the Reality Schism theory, which divides existence into three domains. God rules the spiritual world, Satan controls the noosphere, realm of thought, and humanity governs physical reality. The concept suggests that an originally unified divine being voluntarily fractured itself, distributing power across these three realms rather than maintaining total control. This fragmentation explains why humans seem to possess what some call residual divinity, or divine humanity. We literally contain fragments of godhood within our beings. According to this framework, humanity's biblical mandate to rule over the earth, as mentioned in Genesis, isn't merely a responsibility, it's our cosmic purpose as the physical manifestation of divinity. Our evolutionary development and technological advancement represent the gradual awakening of our collective godhood. Proponents believe humanity's divine journey culminates in what the paradigm recoalescence theory describes as a form of collective consciousness or hive mind. Once humans fully master physical reality through this unified consciousness, our cosmic purpose would be fulfilled, completing the divine plan established at creation. Interestingly, this theory reframes human existence as neither subordinate to divinity nor separate from it, but as an essential component of a complex cosmic power-sharing arrangement. In this view, human advancement isn't just progress, it's literally the maturation of a god. Some adherents even suggest that seeming limitations in human capability aren't flaws, but necessary guardrails preventing premature ascension. After all, what's more dangerous than a god who doesn't yet recognize itself? The human experiment refers to a theological interpretation of the Garden of Eden narrative, where God appears unaware of Adam and Eve's sin until physically present in the garden. This apparent gap in divine knowledge suggests that God may have intentionally limited his omniscience to facilitate genuine human free will. Biblical scholars point to Genesis 3:8-13, where God asks questions like, "Where are you?" and "Have you eaten from the tree?" as evidence that God was not immediately aware of their disobedience. This interpretation connects to the concept of God's ego death, the idea that the Creator voluntarily relinquished certain aspects of divine power to create beings with authentic autonomy. By partially forfeiting omniscience, God established a space where human choices could exist beyond divine foreknowledge, creating what some theologians call a blind spot in God's awareness. Proponents of this theory suggest that humans function as divine agents carrying out God's will on earth from within this blind spot. The entire human experience, from Eden to modern times, represents an ongoing experiment where humanity collectively works to fulfill a cosmic purpose unknown even to themselves. In this framework, the apocalyptic events described in Revelation aren't punishment but completion. The experiment concludes once humanity has successfully manifested God's intentions in the physical realm. Some theological scholars have noted that this interpretation resolves the paradox between divine omniscience and genuine free will. If humans operate in a reality partially hidden from God's foreknowledge, then true choice becomes possible, what advocates call true free will, choice uninfluenced by and invisible to divine awareness until after the decision is made. The theory has implications for understanding humanity's purpose, suggesting we are cosmic laboratory subjects working through a divine plan that requires our authentic participation without direct divine intervention. Like scientists who avoid contaminating their experiments, God maintains distance to preserve the integrity of human choice and the validity of our spiritual development. Lucifer's war suggests a cosmic battle between God and Satan, where humanity itself is the ultimate prize. Ancient texts across multiple religious traditions hint at an ongoing spiritual conflict for human souls, but this theory takes it further by positioning humans as divine beings in development. The theory incorporates elements from both Gnostic and mainstream religious traditions, proposing that humanity collectively represents a nascent deity whose consciousness exists across the noosphere, the sphere of human thought and interconnected minds. This emerging godhood is said to be the true target of demonic forces. According to adherents, spiritual entities opposing human ascension work through sins and distractions to fragment human consciousness and prevent the collective awakening that would fulfill apocalyptic prophecies. Each human mind corrupted by sin represents a battlefield in this larger war. Some proponents point to accelerating technological development and increasing global connectivity as signs of humanity approaching its divine potential. They interpret religious prophecies about the end times not as destruction, but transformation, the completion of humanity's evolution into godhood. The theory suggests that demonic forces work through mundane channels, addiction, hatred, division, and despair, anything that keeps humans isolated from one another and focused on material concerns rather than spiritual development. These influences supposedly prevent the collective consciousness required for humanity's final metamorphosis. Variations of this theory appear in fringe spiritual communities, particularly those blending traditional religious apocalypticism with New Age concepts about human potential. Some adherents claim that periods of intense global conflict represent critical junctures in this spiritual war. Evidence cited by believers includes the emergence of global communications technologies, scientific advances in understanding consciousness, and the growing interest in spiritual practices outside traditional religions. Critics note this conveniently reinterprets religious texts through a modern lens while avoiding falsifiable claims. Interestingly, this theory often appeals to people across the political spectrum, with different groups emphasizing either collective unity or individual spiritual development as the path toward human transcendence. The common thread remains the belief that something is actively working to prevent humanity from achieving its ultimate potential. Humanity's purpose suggests that our true divine mission is to spread truth and beauty throughout the world, rather than focusing on sin and redemption. This theory proposes that since God is the ultimate source of all existence, any genuine pursuit of truth will inevitably lead back to the divine, creating a cycle of ever-increasing beauty and enlightenment. Unlike traditional religious frameworks that center on avoiding sin, this perspective views human existence as fundamentally creative and exploratory. Throughout history, mystics and philosophers across cultures have independently arrived at similar conclusions: that human consciousness serves as a vessel through which divine truth can be manifested in material reality. Several historical texts contain passages that seem to support this view, including obscure Gnostic Gospels and certain Sufi writings that describe humanity as God's eyes and hands in the world. These texts suggest our purpose isn't merely to follow rules, but to actively participate in an ongoing process of cosmic revelation. The theory connects to ancient wisdom traditions that view human creativity as participation in divine work. Renaissance thinkers who embraced both scientific inquiry and spiritual practice often wrote about how their discoveries revealed the mind of God, suggesting that intellectual curiosity itself was a form of worship. Some adherents point to the peculiar human drive for aesthetic beauty as evidence, noting that our appreciation for harmony, proportion, and complexity seems unnecessary for mere survival, yet appears hardwired into our consciousness. This seemingly superfluous capacity might actually be central to our cosmic function. Modern proponents argue this perspective reconciles science and spirituality, as both ultimately seek truth through different methods. They suggest that intellectual, artistic, and spiritual pursuits are not separate activities but variations of the same fundamental human purpose: to discover and amplify truth and beauty in the universe. This contrasts with eschatological theories focused on end times, proposing instead that human purpose is ongoing and generative. According to this view, heaven isn't just a destination, but something we help create through our collective pursuit of truth and manifestation of beauty. The end. This ambitious conspiracy theory weaves together multiple theological concepts to create a grand narrative about humanity's ultimate destiny. According to proponents, humans are not meant for eternal subservience to divine powers, but are on a path toward perfect enlightenment and eventual reunion with God. The theory draws heavily from both Gnostic traditions and modern interpretations of ancient texts. Believers point to passages in obscure religious manuscripts, suggesting that Lucifer's rebellion wasn't against God's authority, but against the notion that humans should remain ignorant. In this framework, the pursuit of knowledge, scientific, spiritual, and metaphysical, isn't sinful, but is actually humanity's divine purpose. Each discovery, from the smallest subatomic particle to the furthest reaches of the cosmos, brings our species one step closer to cosmic awareness. The theory suggests that Earth and the physical universe were created specifically as a vast learning environment for humanity. Every mountain range, ocean depth, and distant galaxy exists as a lesson to be understood. Those who embrace this concept see human consciousness as fundamentally different from other earthly creatures, designed specifically to comprehend the universe's beauty and complexity. Some adherents believe certain ancient monuments contain encoded messages about this ultimate purpose. They claim structures like Göbekli Tepe, the Great Pyramid, and Stonehenge were built by early humans who received glimpses of this cosmic truth and tried to preserve it for future generations. These monuments supposedly align with celestial bodies in ways that hint at humanity's eventual ascension. The most controversial aspect suggests that once humanity collectively reaches complete understanding, a form of species-wide enlightenment, we will transform into our perfect state and rejoin with the divine source. This final ascension supposedly represents the true end times prophesied in various religions, not as an apocalypse, but as a graduation. Critics note the theory conveniently combines elements from numerous religious traditions while ignoring contradictory teachings. Theologians point out that most mainstream religions emphasize faith over knowledge and warn against the hubris of thinking humans can fully comprehend divine mysteries.